Hey guys, and welcome to our second episode of the newly named hashtag survival. There was literally a split second just now where I was about to say one of the other names that got tossed aside, and I had to fucking stop and remember what I was talking about. I also apologize in advance because I sound like shit because I think I'm getting sick. So either I sound terrible or I sound incredibly, incredibly rugged and manly. And if that's the case, then no apology needed. You're actually welcome for experiencing this with me. I'm here again with D, who's right here.
Hello, I'm here.
And today's podcast is going to be... God, if I had like a little drum roll thing that I could press, that'd be great. We're going to talk about what... Oh, I do have a fucking Elgato Stream Deck. I just have to figure out how to... I'll add it to my to-do list. Yeah. Today we're going to talk about what is a survival game. What makes it a survival game? What Steam thinks is a survival game, which is probably an entire topic all by itself. And to dive right into that, I will start off by reading you I don't know, I almost want to call it the site goal, the site motto for the website, which when I first started trying to figure out about doing a website for survival games, I was mainly having a lot of annoyance with trying to look for them and then looking on Steam and having it suggest just the most complete random shit to me. And I wanted to really specifically narrow down on a type of game that I felt was survival. And I talked to a few friends and we handcrafted this little, I don't know, site statement, which goes as follows. A survival game is an open world game geared towards survival, which employs crafting and or base building with gameplay as a singular character. It requires at least 2 upkeep needs from the following list: food, water, sleep, temperature control, and oxygen. And the reasoning that I followed with on this thing, it's kind of part of that original statement, is that I like that gritty feeling of living on that knife's edge where one fuck up could get you killed. So, you know, games that have permadeath, like The Long Dark, is actually a really neat accompaniment to that. Obviously, if you lag out or your power goes out and you get killed, that's very sad. But in general, it's very neat to me to feel like, you know, especially for those of you who played The Long Dark, where you're totally fine, you've got your cave, you're nice and warm, and you're all like, I'm going to go out and, you know, I'm going to go down and get some food, look for some wood. No, I don't need to bring my gun. I don't need to bring much food or shelter. I'm only going to be gone for 20 minutes. And, you know, then a snowstorm comes up or you get a bear attack or, you know, you can kind of be knocked on your ass at the drop of a hat. So, D, I don't think you were involved in that, the crafting of that. I don't think you were in the Discord at that time.
I was not involved in the crafting of that definition, no. But I think, I think it makes sense for the goal that you have for the site and all that. It seems logical to me.
Yeah, I think the thing that we tried to narrow down was just including the need list, the upkeep need. So not just keep your health up, which is, honest to God, like the most generic need out there, but needing to balance 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 things together with that idea of like your HP. So like, yes, all these things have HP for your tunes, but you also have to juggle the food and water or food, water, and sleep. The other part was playing as a singular character as opposed to, I can't even think of what they're called because I don't play them, but something more like Frostpunk, where you're kind of playing a bunch of people or just like a community.
Sort of like a strategy kind of 4X style game, more like where you're this like separate disembodied overseer of a whole civilization or group of people or whatever, that sort of thing is I think what you mean, right?
Yeah, I guess it would be more. What's that one that always gets recommended on my Steam thing? RimWorld. So it's more of that
Ah,
like colony sim,
yeah.
which is again, it's not a bad thing. And I keep thinking I want to pick that game up, and I have not yet. But even and the site is constantly evolving. So even though I do not have a category for games of that nature, I'm really focusing on the games that the green hells of the world, the green hells, the stranded deep, the long dark. I thought I was going to cough, but I was not. Ha. So
Success.
I know that is like the highlight of my day so far is muffling a cough when I think I'm going to cough. The other part I had brought up on this page, because I actually have a whole little page on the website, which I'm only kind of bringing up now because we might be changing the site around and I'm not sure how this page will evolve. But the second portion I'd put, because whenever I say, I don't play X because it's just not, not my type of survival game, or I don't feel like it's quite the survival that I like to play. And then people always bring up Valheim. Always. Always, always, always. If I got a quarter for every time someone bought up Valheim or Minecraft, but Minecraft is like a whole nother category. But if I had a quarter for every time someone bought up Valheim to me, I would be like, I wouldn't need a Patreon. I could probably quit my job. It would be a very nice, cushy living, honest to God. Basically, what I said in my thing is that Valheim is a very common example that folks bring up, and I just can't see it as the same niche of survival game as these other games that I'm kind of narrowing in on, these kind of bushcraft survival. It has a very pretty atmosphere. It's unique. It's got really flexible building aspects, and it's fun to play with people, with friends, solo, whatever the case may be. And from the very first minute that I actually had I was gonna say a Twitch subscriber, but she's not a Twitch subscriber. She's like a Discord community member for the website. Since she gifted it to me and I tried it, I've always called it MMO light. Like it always feels like that kind of keep my hands occupied doing things while I'm Netflixing or I'm bullshitting with people and I'm kind of just derping around. Like I never felt any sense of danger or immersion or survival. Me and a friend or two ran around basically with the bows and the starter gear and just kind of killed shit, like trolls, whatever, kite them. Nothing ever killed us really. Running around with the wolves because that was amusing for a few minutes until the howling got on our nerves. And it was just, you layer on the food buffs and you kill some mobs. And then you log out and do whatever. And it just never struck me as being survival-y. It kind of struck me like Minecraft, just a Viking, non-pixely kind of version. But you played Valheim too.
I did. Yes, that is true. Um, and I feel like we'll probably get into more later on other games. Valheim is sort of the one that I guess you decided as your since it's been brought up to you so much, it makes sense to sort of have it as like, all right, here's an example of where I draw the line. But yeah, Valheim itself, I mean, I would agree. I think it's not quite survival in the same way that like the Long Dark is at all. It's definitely more like MMO light is a fun term. I like that. It it feels like it's more about the building and the adventure and the progression. It's less about surviving against the elements, which yeah, again, it sort of wraps around to okay, well, what is a survival game versus what is not, and yeah, Valheim, because of its popularity, I think is a good one to examine a little bit more as to okay, why do we call it? Well, we don't call it, but why do people call it survival? Uh, why are you so strongly against calling it survival? That sort of thing. It's it's a I don't want to say complicated conversation, but it can be a lengthy conversation, a lengthy debate, I suppose, depending on who you have it with.
Yeah, and I think it can become quite a heated conversation with people, and people do get very defensive when I say that I don't feel the same about Valheim being kind of that survival, like knife's edge kind of thing. But I feel the same. Oh no, I might die in Valheim as I feel in World of Warcraft or Mario World. Like the thing will touch me and I will lose my HP points and I will die. It's a lot different than feeling like I'm making decisions calculated to have me survive. I'm balancing my needs against the environment, against opposing forces like AI and et cetera, et cetera. I'm really just, can I eat this whatever food? Okay, now I have 50 hit points and he hits for 20. Great. Now I will go kill him and now I will log out of the game. Ta-da. That's kind of how I feel like it. Once I finished the original base stuff, I uninstalled it and I was done with it. I didn't come back for the Hearth and Home stuff, and I think they recently had another update, which is great. Again, it's a beautiful game and people should play it and have fun with it. It is just not for me.
I think you brought up something that I was thinking about, and I want to address from my own standpoint. This idea of not really caring so much about death and dying in the game not really being that big of a deal. I was thinking about how, like, in certain games, like, we've been playing a lot of 7 Days to Die, so I was thinking in terms of 7 Days to Die, we, dying it's a pain in the butt, and, like, it's not convenient, and you don't want to die, but there has been times when I'm like, oh, it's really annoying that, like, my leg is broken and I'm starving. I could just kill myself and reset my stuff and it'll be fine. And I feel like if a game lets you do that, if you don't care, if dying is so inconsequential and not worrisome to you that you know, you would jump off a building and kill yourself just to reset your stats and it would not affect you in any way, I think that maybe it's leaning a little bit away from what you might want from a survival game. So yeah, for me, what makes a survival game more hardcore versus a little lighter and maybe like survival light or whatever subgenre you want to is how important or how much it matters if you die, like how concerned you are about actually surviving versus death being an inconvenience.
Yeah, and I think that death is one of the things that can be. It's kind of the inverse. We didn't mention it on that little blurb. I talked about the things that I like to see in order to kind of qualify it as something I'm interested in. But it's a perfectly valid example, is that there are the inverse things, the scarcity of resource, the things being impactful, breaking a leg, how can you fix it, redoing your life or respawning or not being able to. The interloper for the Long Dark is hard for a lot of people because they literally just drop you wherever. And it could be in the hardest zone. It could be in the easiest zone, but it's really usually in the hardest zone in your middle of the woods. And you don't have anything really. You can't make anything. You can't do anything. And oftentimes I would browse through like friends' streams on Twitch and they would just be like spawning and dying and spawning and dying because they could not find anything. The 7 Days to Die thing, there is a lot of flexibility in that. By doing our own server and renting it, it is very cool that I can change it. I could make it that we drop everything on death. I could make it that we drop nothing on death. I can make it that when you log out of the server, you lose everything that's on your toolbar. There is flexibility. I can ratchet up the AI's damage. I could ratchet down our damage. I don't mind things that let you do stuff like that. And from the time we were playing the DayZ servers, the private rented servers, there were often times we were doing ones or going on public servers where people would do that. They had that kind of scalability where they would do things like tamping down the food, ratcheting up illness and stuff, making sure that you don't get too much ammo and guns, because that's another way that things get overwhelmed really quick. The first, however, I can't even really give you a time frame for 7 days because some people play for 9 hours at a time. Some people AFK for 4 hours at a time. Like,
Listen, that was an accident. That was a very tragic accident. Um, this actually does not to. I hope I'm not interrupting middle of what you're saying, but um, this does brings up a sort of interesting question, something I'm curious about your stance on. So yeah, a lot of games do have this element of customization. Like you can set your server settings, like for example on DayZ or on 7 Days, you can make it harsher. You can make these things matter more. But do you determine, whether that makes a game more survivally based on the way that the devs intended it to be played, or based on the way they kind of let you adjust it? So, like, yes, 7 days you can adjust to be harsher, but the default settings are less harsh. So how would you judge then? Would you judge it based on the intent or based on what you can do with it? How you can adjust it to be harder or easier depending on what you want?
7 days is kind of a weird one for me because it's not in the same camp of games that I take seriously. It's not plugged in with Green Hell or Stranded Deep or TLD or anything like that. It's got that whole, I'm running around, I've got a chainsaw, 16 guns, an entire complement of mining tools, a car, a motorcycle, all in my pocket. And I'm overweighted and I have a broken leg, but I'm still sprinting and I'm still fighting off people with a rocket launcher. Like, I'm never going to take it as a serious survival game. And that's probably why I don't play it alone. I only play it when I'm with you. And then we end up tweaking settings to kind of fuck around with it. Like, maybe we'll have the horde come more often. Maybe we'll make it bigger. Maybe we'll make them hit the blocks harder. It's just got that element of like, I had a long work day and now it's my game time and I'm going to fuck around. And this is something where I'm not really having to concentrate too much and I can just fuck around and have fun. Because all the survival games that I truly, truly like, outside of the ones that are scary, like The Forest, because I'm a huge baby, I actually prefer playing them for the most part alone. Like, the fact that TLD is solo and is not multiplayer makes me so, so happy. It's so nice just to wander around and explore and be at my own pace and everything. But if The Forest I played solo, I would still be crouched on the rock in the middle of the lake crying. So, like, it varies. I do appreciate when they do give you the ability to change things. 7 Days is obviously one example. It doesn't matter what they changed. It would never strike me as being a certain way. There are mods. We actually have a community member in our Discord who has thousands of hours in 7 Days, I'm sure. And I know she plays with a lot of different mods, and I'm sure that can change a bunch, but it would also have to inherently change those base things for me to really care. Like, it's fine if you want to go and do, only headshots because that's harder, yay. Or you want to add bandits, or you want to add more questing or anything. This is just layering on top of the game for me. I would need you to, you can no longer put the vehicles in your pocket. You can only carry X amount of actual weight and not the chainsaw and not the fucking auger and, these 72 things. I don't know if that
6,000 planks
motorcycle.
of wood, 6,000 rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 6,000 pieces of coal. We can just, I can make 7 forges and all the workbenches, put them in my pocket, walk to a new base area and be set up in 30 seconds. Like, no matter what you do, you'd have to change the base elements of it. TLD does have a lot of customization, but it's more tweaks you can do for your game. So they've got the base levels like Pilgrim, the Voyager, and, all the way up to Interloper. And then you can just do a custom game where you can be like, I don't want, as many wolves, but I want more bears, or I want them to be less aggressive, but I do want the stat depletion to be higher, and you can just kind of tailor make it to your experience. But the problem too with survival games is that I think more so than, and this is going to be a super vague, kind of weird statement, but I'm trying to go for like an overarching point, is that I think with survival games, you're juggling a lot of things that a player has to be capable of in order to let it let them kind of see what their competency is. It's not straightforward like, here's a platformer game, I fucking suck at platforming. Here's a puzzle game, I'm fucking sucking at puzzles. Or here's a shooter game, and so I can play and I do great, but maybe my reaction speed, and that's a very finite thing. And maybe I get a better mouse, or maybe I get better internet, and maybe that helps a bit, and da da da. So often, for so many of the games that I've either moderated or I've helped with or whatever in the survival genre, I think what ends up fucking people so much with survival games, and maybe it's just because it's a video game and you don't think you have to think this way, but it always ends up being common sense shit. Like, where do I find coconuts? Where's where do I get water? Like,
Where
how do I
where do
get,
I where do I find sticks?
yeah, like, I can't find sticks. Did you try cutting down a bigger tree and then seeing if you could break that further down? Oh, well, it snowed and the water froze. Where do I get water? Okay, well, if I dropped you out in the wilderness, does like melting the snow not occur to you at all? Like, I'm in the snow and it's negative 20 degrees and I have no clothing and no fire and I'm taking damage. Please help. Like,
I think you're right that I think a big part of that is the fact that it is a video game. And so if you are new to survival games, or survival games are not really a type of game that you play often, you might not think about things like that because you're used to games where surviving is not it's not the key sort of point of the game. You're not worrying about starving or finding water, so you don't think about it in the terms of logical real life situations. You think about it in the sense of, okay, well, it's a video game, so surely I have to loot a chest somewhere and that'll give me water, or something of that sort. You don't necessarily know right away to approach it from this sort of real life logic sort of direction, and that probably seems silly, but in a way it also makes sense because it's all about your mindset when you go into the game, right? Are you approaching it like real life, or are you not? And I would say a lot of people probably are not approaching it like it's real life, and they're thinking more in terms of video games and how you play video games and how video games present things to you. And I think that's maybe why people struggle when they're first introduced to a survival game where that when the logic is different.
yeah. And I mean, you can see it just from moderating forums, moderating discords, and social media for different games. You can see it on the linear path they took to onboard into your game. The people that come to the games I've done with experience in the forest, experience in Green Hell, experience in Stranded Deep, they're already finding their way. The people who are coming here and they're like, I love survival games, I play Valheim and Minecraft all the time, they're dying. They're asking me where there are rocks. They're asking me how to get water. They're asking me why they're dying of cold. Like, it is completely different. And even though there might be similarities in those two games, like, yeah, you have to eat in Valheim, yay, it's not to the same degree. Like, Valheim is nothing like Interloper TLD. It is nothing like Green Hell and getting illnesses and trying to close wounds with, ants, or cleaning things with bandages and shit. Like, it is not like that at all. Like, you can get a potion and you can bring back health, but that's a very game concept. Like, I made a potion, I made this magical thing that restores my HP. Not, I rested. The Long Dark, I rested, I slept, and I was able to heal a broken rib from a moose attack. That's very different than I bandaged it, and now I'm better. And now I can go back to sprinting.
Yeah, no, and I think that again comes back to whether the survival elements are more of a absolute thing or if they're an inconvenience. Like I mentioned with dying earlier, whether dying really matters and is something you really want to avoid versus just it's slightly annoying.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of complaints in some games, or you'll see it a lot where, depending on the game, there can be, it's usually about the food and water depletion. Like, each game, sometimes it's really weighed one direction and you feel like you're fucking eating 3 deers a day and drinking a lake of water and your tune is still crying. And then some, it's like you eat food and now you can go about your entire, gameplay session and don't have to eat again. And, there's definitely balance that can be done. And I don't even think of it in terms of like, oh, that's what survival games are so bad. And it's not. A lot of these games, pretty much most of my gaming library for survival is one dev, two devs, like there being the tester, the QA, the fucking coder, the developer, the troubleshooter. They're doing everything. And they have so much shit going on that oftentimes they're not sitting there and being like, well, let me calculate, let me read this book on how much water your body absorbs and the evaporation rate and shit. Like, they're not doing it. It might be done on a future pass. It might not. But it is the kind of thing where some games are starting to really, really dial in. Scum. Look at the metabolism system in Scum. That's getting really fleshed out. And with each thing they put in, they just put in the thing with the sun and getting shaded from the sun and having that be impactful. It's all starting to play in, and you can start to really do that. I think what it ends up being for some of these things too is what I kind of call like a sexy mechanic, a sexy mech. And some of these things that are cornerstones of survival are not sexy. Like, needing to drink is not sexy. Needing to eat or shit or piss or sweat or get sunburned, these are not sexy mechs. No one is like, oh God, I got that game where you can sweat and vomit and get dysentery. Like, no one is saying that. I don't think anybody is saying that. People might be saying that, but like, I don't know who's saying that.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I remember a
Don't say
time.
you say it.
No, no, I don't say it now. No, no, no. But what I'm getting at is when I was younger and I would see a game where it's like, "Oh, you have to eat and you have to drink or else you'll die." And that blew my little mind. Just like that was like, "What? That's something you do in real life. You don't do that in video games. That's crazy." And I feel like when I was younger, that to me kind of blew my mind, but now it's sort of like, yeah, all right, I guess.
Yeah, well, we all grew up on Oregon Trail with a D has dysentery. Oh well,
Yeah.
I guess we have to kick her out the wagon
Oh,
then.
yeah. Well, unfortunate.
Well, we went completely, like, it's like the pendulum, right? So it swung completely the other direction. Now, what do you see pop up on Steam every fucking 5 minutes? Gas station simulator, mechanic simulator, bum simulator, drug, PC builder, hobo, cop, prostitute. Everybody just wants to experience everything. We can go down into how much of this might be the rise in this because we were all trapped in our houses for 2 years with COVID, and we were like, I would much rather be a prostitute, but wait, I can try that on this game. But, as someone who has sat there, not that I've sat there because I'd hang myself, but who has seen his wife sit and be making a house in Sims for like literally from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed, and I come over there and she's going through like carpet colors and she's putting small little objects on a shelf and rotating them like she's in a fucking IKEA using an IKEA mod in the game. Like, it's it's crazy, the detail.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would be kind of interesting. And I'm not saying for these survival games that they need to go that you know that hardcore. Like, I don't need to lose my teeth. I don't want, like, you log in the game and everything's blurry and it's like, oh, did I not tell you your tune's nearsighted? Yes, and you don't have glasses. So those could be zombies. Those could be trees. Don't know. Good luck.
It's
I think,
interesting because yes, I mean I agree. Obviously there should be some divide between a game and going full on complete realism, real life, is it really fun to have to play it, oh, you're nearsighted, like, is that enjoyable? Is that an enjoyable game experience? And it's funny because that's actually a potential future topic for another podcast in the future. I'm looking at our list here, and yeah, that's, realism and mechanics, versus mechanics in games, and what makes it fun and what's going too far, etc. So that can be like a whole separate conversation that we can talk about more.
It is, and it's definitely something that kind of it plays a bit into what makes a survival, because usually, and again, for those who aren't aware, I used to be the community manager for the official Green Hell Discord for a year, and I am the current community manager, does all socials and stuff for the infected, for like going on 2 years. So what we end up seeing a lot from people is you get that pushback. Like, if you have a mechanic in your game because it's survival, and then you decline some other mechanic, or maybe it's something that's going really kind of off the beaten path, like, why is my character not nearsighted? Or maybe it's just something where you're trying to do some balance, then people will immediately try to bludgeon you over the head with all the things that aren't true to life. So especially in a lot of these survival games where they feature base building, that's a huge one, because people are coming in for this building, which for a lot of these indie devs, there's a lot that goes into the game. Some of it you can accomplish decently easy, but some of it takes a lot of work. Getting the AI to function correctly takes a lot of work. And so you might end up putting easier effort into something like the building for a bit. You're putting in decor, you're putting in, fancy things you can build, and people start doing the building until you can catch up on the AI. And then you get this divide between the builders who are like, yeah, I totally want to be able to like sprint all around with 37 logs on my shoulder and build my house and only have to eat once a week and carry 8,000 pounds of rocks and and the survival people who are like, I don't want to do any of this. Why would I cut down a tree and pick up 17 logs and put them on my shoulder? That makes no sense. And you get into a lot of these things where you're like, look, it is not realistic that you can pick up 7 logs. And then they try to throw it back in your face, like, oh, well, it's not realistic XYZ. And it's like, well, even though it is a realistic survival game, it is never going to be 100% realistic.
Sure. Absolutely. And I think that's why I think that divide is why you see a lot of games of that type. They'll make like a creative versus a survival mode. So like the creative one, you can just go nuts and you can just build whatever, and then the survival mode actually turns on all the things that matter. Of course, now in my head, all I can think of is Minecraft, but I know there are other games that do that. I cannot remember for the life of me what game it is, but there's some survival game that we played for a while that had different levels, and one of them actually basically turned off all the animals, turned off all the enemies, and it was just you hanging out in the world. And I think you still had to worry about like the survival aspects, like you still had to eat and drink and manage your temperature and stuff, but there was no outside enemies, and you could kind of just have a more chill experience.
Yeah, and there are a lot of smaller indie games now that are implementing something like that. Infected, for example, has a god mode and a creative mode where you can basically turn on and off certain features. But weirdly enough, especially when you're talking again about these 1 devs, 2 devs, or they're trying to work on certain things, I'm completely fine with them not doing it. I'm completely fine, and I so desperate, like 10-10 from the American Judge, wherever you want to do it, for fucking Hinterland and TLD, where they just were like, this is what you get. This mode, this mode, this mode. You get permadeath, tough tits. You get this, no jumping, tough tits. And this is what we're doing. I love that. Because what I see happening a lot with a lot of these smaller indie devs is like they come out with this vision and they start to work on it, and then people are bitching and they want things changed that the dev does not want to change. And then once they start to cave a bit and change things, and then it starts to unravel. And then what ends up being the game, 6-7 months later, is not what it was on paper before they were able to start. And I'm like, yeah, it's early access, and you do that to get input from people. And it's like, yeah, and I can get input from people. And I've run many things where I get input from people, but at the end of the day, I still stick with what I want to do. Like, input is input. they're not the ones making it. You don't have to go along with what they want. You can take it under advisement. You can make it your own way, however the way may be. There's also creative mode. See, the problem is I never play those modes. I don't play any of these passive whatever modes, so I never really pay attention when they're offered. But I know that Forest has one where you can do the same thing.
Yeah.
Usually, sometimes it'll be about building, and sometimes it'll more just be like, you have some scary thing in your game or some aggressive thing in your game, and can you disable it?
Right. I wish I could remember what game it is I'm thinking of. My mind keeps going back to Subsistence, but I don't think it was Subsistence.
You can mess around with the AI in Subsistence. Like, you can make them that they don't attack you, that they only do retaliation attacks, that they're super aggressive.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
maybe it was Subsistence. Genuinely, I wish I could remember. I remember talking about it and being like, "Oh, that's cool that they let you do that. That's an option." And the title of the game just fluttered from my memory.
well, I mean, there's always going to be some of these things that people want that don't end up being in there, and some that don't get used. And I think it's just kind of thing where it's like, if the dev puts it in, great. But at the end of the day, if you just want to sit around and make a 12-foot, a 20-foot tall mansion that's, 18 floors and 3 miles wide, and you have to go and do all the tree cutting and all the rock hauling and everything, then that's it. I think that's like the weirdest, I don't want to call it an argument, but like the weirdest discussion loop I get into on the Discord is when people are like, I'm trying to build, and they show me this massive thing. And they're like, but, you need to make the trees respawn instantly, and I need to get more logs, and you need to make it so I sprint when I have it. And I'm like, you could build smaller. Like, did that not occur to you? Like, if you want to require less logs, then you make something that requires less logs.
Yeah, I mean either that or you have to unfortunately deal with the fact that it's going to take time and effort and work to build something that large.
Yeah. And more, there are some developers who are really getting into, I think for a while, the realism and the survival elements, developers too, focused on the player. Like your little arms and your little head, and what things do you do that's realistic? You have to sleep, you have to shit, you have to piss, you have to drink water or whatever. And I think recently, I don't know if it's technology or time or how Unreal 5 is making it easier to accomplish certain things or whatever the case may be, but recently you're seeing more where all of a sudden they're like, it can be the environment. It can be that the weather is fucking with you, that you're getting these weather events that do damage to your house, that, seasonal, like, oh God, give me a seasonal game and I will love you forever. Like, give me something where I need to pick X thing during this season, or I need to fish and dry it and store it if I want it for the winter. People who don't get a certain amount of protein from fish, they don't dry it and store it before winter, or they don't dry meat before animals get scarce, and then they're complaining. And it's like, but that is how it is. This is not a coding issue where it's like, oh my God, the bears aren't around in winter and now I can't get the 20 pounds of easy meat. That is by design. Like, I designed them to hibernate. That's a feature. It's not a bug.
Right. It's not a bug. It's intended. It's the intended gameplay.
And you have to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think to sort of loop back around to the initial topic of what makes a survival game and what doesn't, um, I think part of maybe that problem comes from the fact that the survival tag, especially on Steam, as you mentioned earlier, is very, very wide. And as somebody who kind of hates when genres are treated very, very strictly and gatekeeped and such, there's also, you have to be willing to also break down a genre. So right now, survival is very broad, and it can, you can look at two games that are tagged survival or considered survival and get completely different products, like Valheim versus The Long Dark. Both are called survival, both are completely different games. So I think that's why you get these issues where players come into a game and they demand changes like that, like, oh, you have to make the trees respawn quicker, or you have to put more animals in the winter, because they were expecting Valheim and they got the Long Dark. You know what I mean? So I think I think part of that actually comes back to the initial topic of survival as a genre and what can sort of be done to either make better subgenres or better refine what the genre is and what the genre means. I think it's just natural for a genre to sort of develop and shift and change over time, uh, especially when it grows. You know, when more devs start to develop a certain type of game, or more people start to play them.
Yeah,
And I
I mean,
think, sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just saying, I think that's a big thing, and I think part of it is sort of figuring the genre out and figuring out the subgenres and deciding, okay, people are going to call Valheim survival. Like, no matter what you do, they're going to call it survival. But maybe we can call it like adventure survival or something. Whereas the Long Dark is like a bushcraft survival or something. You know, maybe we need to. By we, I mean, the community as a whole needs to sort of, re-examine how we define things within the genre.
yeah, I mean, saying survival is wide is like saying the Grand Canyon is kind of deep. Like, it's just one of those things where
Yeah.
it's, yeah, it's really bad. And it's also unfortunate in that even though something like sports is very wide, when you divide sport, you have very clear, like incredibly clear lines that you can divide it on. I know this is a golf game, and I know this is a football game. Like they're they're very different. But
Sure.
with survival, there's just so much overlap, and I think one of the things I've been talking about with we call them the nerd panel. It's kind of like this little advisory board within the I couldn't think of what to name them within the hashtag survival Discord. Is we have been talking about possibly doing something in the future where we kind of talked with the community members, and maybe we came up with maybe a page where, even though we have that index where you can filter the games by certain criteria, maybe making one where we came up with like some community definitions and then put those filters in there. Because there are games that in my mind I call them survival bushcraft, and then there are games where I call them like MMO light or survival light, and just if I say that tag to myself, I can immediately put other games in there. Raft to me is survival light, and Valheim is survival light. Like, these are not games where I'm like, oh god, I'm gonna die. Brr, 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 brr. It's just,
Sure.
and I'm not saying they're shit games, because I'm not. They're not for me, but they're not shitty. But I just think that,
Yeah, it's not a matter of quality, it's a matter of the content.
yeah, and it's confusing. It is incredibly confusing for people. And I end up having to do this entire thing when people are like, oh, can you suggest some survival games to me? And I'm always like, can you tell me what you played and what you liked?
Hmm.
Because just because you're playing whatever it is Infected or Valheim or Minecraft or whatever, I could give you things with a tag, and there's no guarantee you're going to not only like them, but that you are going to be, and I hate to use the word, but almost to an extent like competent to do what they're asking you to do, or like what they're asking you
Yeah.
to do. Like if you like, I mean, to you to an extent too, like you like running around with 1,000 guns and sprinting and jumping and punching things in the face, and you are flexible enough to be able to adapt. Even though you still try to run, you break a leg, and then you arrive trying to punch them in the face and they eat you. You're flexible enough that, often you can be like, oh, I see, I cannot punch the volatile in the face. I now have the memo. Thank you. But some people want to bend the game to what they think or what they want to play it as, and you can't do that with these games. You can't bend interloper TLD. It's not gonna.
Right.
It ain't gonna go anywhere.
Hmm. Uh, yeah. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying for sure. And I was thinking back to my favorite genre, which is shooters, and how it's the same, right? You can say I'm a fan of first person shooters, but then there are so many there's different styles, right? So like my favorite games are arena shooters, so things like Quake, Unreal, those sort of things, and they are vastly different from like Counter Strike or uh, Rainbow Six. So it's a similar sort of idea, but maybe a little less strict. Then maybe a little easier than survival, because at least you sort of know when you say first person shooter, you know the very basics of what you're getting. Maybe the gameplay can be vastly different, but at least okay, I'm gonna have guns and it's gonna be in first person. So you you have the most generic idea, and even with survival though, the most generic parts of it can be so vastly different. So, like, if you were to say, "Oh, this is a survival game because I can eat and drink," but it's like, all right, but eating and drinking affects you completely differently in Valheim versus DayZ versus Scum versus 7 Days versus The Long Dark. So it's
And not
yeah.
only them, but I feel like there's even, I don't play these genres, but I feel like there are a lot of, I don't even know which genre word I would be using, but like a lot of these little like adventure or RPG type games where you are doing food for buffs similar to Valheim. And so, I always joke about it, but it's like if your criteria is you're eating things for HP and you're trying not to lose your hit points, then like, okay, World of Warcraft is a survival game, Super Mario World is a survival game, like not wanting to have your toon lose hit points and die is a really low bar. I don't even know if there's light in between the bar and the floor. Like that's how low it is. And eating shit to regain health, same thing. I don't think these can be the bars that we use, because I will throw so many games into this this fucking survival tag if that's our criteria. Get ready for survival Donkey Kong or something fucking stupid, because I will put it there.
Right. And I think maybe that's where the struggle is specifically with survival games, is that, like I said, they're even with shooters, the most you can have the most basic idea of what you're getting, and it's gonna be pretty much consistent across the board. Whereas you don't have that currently with survival games, as they are currently, as the genre is currently being treated and explained on platforms like Steam.
Yeah. Well, this is what worries me about the two big names that were announced as throwing their hat into the survival genre. One was Nightingale, which is going to be a Victorian style kind of survival game, which then apparently, to summarize really quickly, they were going to be building it on this certain kind of program or software, and then they decided to not use that. So the studio that was going to, it's like the owner of the studio basically divested that studio from their portfolio, and it went from being something that was kind of like alluded at as being maybe larger MMO style. It sounds like it's going to be smaller, like either small group or potentially single player. The head of Hinterland slash The Long Dark, he has a really good thread on his Twitter where he kind of breaks it down for people. But I'm really wondering, like, where is the survival in that? I've watched their streams, their little like teaser streams. I watched their most recent dev one. I've watched all their little footage and shit and all their little articles, and there has been no explanation of the survival aspects at all. Just, we find the survival genre interesting, which I really want to be like, of course you do, because people are finally seeing that it makes money. And then obviously Blizzard throwing its hat in the ring and being like, oh, we're totes going to make a survival. And that, I'm pretty sure, as of my last Google fooing, that's all we know. that
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Yeah, there's no details yet, but I highly suspect something very Valheim like.
Oh, God, yeah. And I mean, not to diverge off my podcast, but like, I'm sorry, aren't you also waiting on Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 and now another Diablo mobile game? And also, you've been 2 years now without a new X pack for World of Warcraft. And maybe there's this little scandal thing investigation. So like, is this really the time for you to be all like, we're totes making a giant magical survival world?
It is an odd choice, certainly. Um, because yes, there are all these anticipated titles that people have been waiting for. I've been waiting for Overwatch 2 for like 2 years, and we're only just now starting to see developments with that, and they're gonna like open the beta for PvP only very soon. And so yes, it is an odd. It was odd. It was an odd thing to read, an odd announcement to see, and
I think
I
it's a
don't.
squirrel. I think it's very much like all this shit. People are like, where's Diablo? Where's this? And they were like, Squirrel Survivor game. Make a
Yep.
survival game.
Yeah.
Look over there.
I think I don't normally like to say this, but I think that they saw that Valheim was popular and that Valheim was starting to die down, and they were like, "Up, time to fill that. Look what we got." So I think it was sort of them riding the wave there that Valheim had started.
That's literally what I think of that wave. And plus, now they're being bought out by Microsoft. So, like, you could put all that shit on the back burner until
Yeah.
this gets figured. But anyway, back to the survival podcast. Blizzard survival game is going to suck. So, in like 3 years when it comes out, you can come back to this podcast and you can tell me if I was right.
We got Nostradamus over here.
I'm just gonna go and put in the keyword. And Jordan said Blizzard survival game will be on mobile and never be released.
Oh,
Don't you
boy.
guys have phones?
I'm feeling physical pain right now, remembering that.
It was so bad. Oh, I feel bad for everybody who makes survival games and has to deal with people throwing their hat in the ring. And I think that's a problem too. I know we only have like 15 minutes and I don't want to go off on too many tangents, but I think that's a problem too, is that as people who are in the survival genre, players and dedicated devs are really like refining their games, refining what it means, trying to really distill down what happens. You get these like, what are they called? I know there's something like Sally Come Lately or some shit, but you get these people who see the money and they're like, I'm doing this, and then they throw this hat in the ring that dilutes it. Like
Yeah.
if you throw enough Valheims into the pool, you're gonna dilute the fuck out of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that certainly is, that's part of the reason why we're seeing such a wide net for the survival genre on things like Steam, because it's true, you see that a genre is becoming popular and you want to get in on that, but you're sort of like, okay, but I don't really like this aspect, so I'm going to sacrifice that aspect. And then then people start to sort of, and then someone sees, that you've made a game. They're like, oh, that's cool. I want to throw my hat in the ring, but I don't like this aspect and this aspect, so I'm going to get rid of them. And then the chain kind of continues, and then you get, like 100 Valheim clones and such. So I
Yeah, and
think
you're
you're
like, it's
right.
survival because he ate an apple. Did you see him eat an apple? That's pretty survival-y, that apple.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
and
terrible.
yeah, it's rough. Like it's in a rough spot right now, and I don't. Again, I'm normally a person that sort of scoffs and doesn't enjoy when genres become very gatekeepy, but there is a huge difference between gatekeeping a genre and just sort of not having gates at all. So I think that's sort of what the problem is right now is the gates are wide open and nobody can quite decide or dedicate to a specific definition.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think at the end of the game, or at the end of the game, at the end of the day, I don't think it's necessarily even gatekeeping. I just think there needs to be organization. I think there needs to just be some kind of community consensus where we're like, look, maybe it is something similar to the hashtag survival website where we're like, do XYZ, and that kind of qualifies as bushcraft. If it's something where you can run around and you have magical wormhole pockets and you never take injury and you could eat a fucking cattail and you can live for 4 days, like perhaps that is an abstract survival game or a non-realistic survival game or something. Just put them into tags. So that way when you click on it, you can actually drill down like other games rather than it just being now where you click on survival and then you go into the refine tab for it and you don't get things that really help you refine it. You get things like action or indie or simulation or atmospheric or first or third person, and those are great, but they're not going to tell me what the gameplay is like. Dying in first person versus dying in third person because I can't understand how to find a rock is not really going to be helpful. Or I
Yeah,
didn't know that I had to eat or I had to drink.
yeah, no, absolutely. Those are all great tags and stuff to have to get a sense of the atmosphere and the experience you're going to have, but it's not informative, and I think that's the issue.
Yeah, but I think people don't see it. It'd be like if I took off all the game types for sports and I just dropped you into sports. And you're like, well, I wanted a golf game. My friend wants a football game. And I'm like, okay, I have first person. I've got outdoors. I've got pixel. Yeah, pixel. Do you want indie? Exciting? Not exciting?
I've got team management. I'm not going to tell you what type of team, just
Yeah,
team management.
just could be football, could be soccer. I've also got the Australian soccer. I've got footy. Like, just kind of pick what. They're all the same. Believe me, if you've played football, you'll totally be able to play. What is this game here? Oh, pickleball. Yes, completely the same. Now that you can play football, this pickleball game will be super easy for you.
Uh, yeah,
It's true though. I mean, it needs some organization. I think at the end of the day, it'd be a lot easier if the criteria isn't what it's kind of shaping up to be when people share things on Twitter or they share buzzwords about a game or whatever. The criteria seems to be don't die. Like survival is don't die. Like I don't want to die. And I hate that because I also try not to die in Mario. I also try not to die in Warcraft. Like I don't try to die in these games. You
yeah.
can't tell me that there's any kind of penalties for it because in a lot of these games you're talking about, like how often do people fucking respawn in Resident Evil? How often do you respawn in any of these horror games? Like,
A large portion of games is don't die. Is like that's if you strip everything away, that's the goal is don't die. So it's not really an effective way to define a genre.
no. But unfortunately it's like the one thing they can do. I'm totally fine if you want to put, some variants on there and you want to put like, okay, this game is horror and stuff, but if the only thing you have to give you survival is that you don't want the scary thing to eat you, maybe you'll be under the umbrella. But again, like, I understand your survival tag will be like, okay, this game is survival horror. I'm getting, it's going to be something scary and it's going to try and kill me, and I don't want that to happen. Fine. But when they tag it with just full on survival, and then it's the same thing in, you know, it's that game next to The Long Dark, next to Valheim. These are three entirely different experiences. And
Right,
not only might
exactly.
you not be as competent, but you also might not even like the other two because they are really different from just don't get eaten by a scary thing.
Right, exactly. So really, like the sort of the failure to kind of define the genre well doesn't just affect devs. It affects the players as well because nobody knows. Like the players don't know what they're getting. The devs have to contend with people not getting what they want and then demanding changes, which then makes them wonder if they should compromise their vision. And it's yeah, so it's not good all around. It's not great for the genre as a whole, and there needs to be some sort of understanding or coming together of the community to determine these subgenres or how you because you're not gonna I don't think at this point unless survival sort of if it just sort of comes down from the popularity it's riding right now and suddenly there's less games again. I don't think at this point that you're going to be able to take the tag of just survival and really sort of narrow that down enough. I think at this point it's got to be a matter of coming up with some idea of subgenres within it.
Yeah. And I think that people need to understand that you can. I know it's like, well, Steam puts it there, so like, what can I do? Yeah, but you can do a lot though. You can. You can support creators and sites, plug to our site, but you can support places and be a part of the conversation when people are trying to do this. As a super random tag in, but I work in an industry that isn't regulated really. Certain aspects are, but certain aren't. And so you get a lot of people popping up, a lot of businesses where they are just complete shit. So even though you're looking for, a business that does a thing, looking at the first one to the second one, it's a huge difference. And so what ended up happening is experts in the field started getting together and putting up this advisory board that businesses can join, and they kind of work to come up with standards across the industry because there's not going to be any kind of governmental oversight or state level or all the way down to counties and stuff. And the more that get in there, you start to get the word out, you start to show them what you do, what the criteria is for joining, what standards you uphold, and then you start to look for them like, oh yeah, I'm looking for a business in this thing, but I am looking for a business that has this accreditation, that has this, sticker on the door that they are part of this, because now I know baseline what standards they have. And it's kind of the same thing here where it's like, if people start doing that, if they start qualifying and giving these games tags, sure, maybe Steam isn't going to do it, but I myself have been like at least 80 discords, and I have to tell you, like, I see a lot of the same people in every single survival game discord. Like the people who are truly, truly, truly addicted to these games, like they are in all these discords. They are part of the same conversations, and these are the same people who can help shape these definitions. And that way it does become easier where it's like, hey, I'm looking for a survival game. What kind of survival? Oh, I'm looking for survival horror. I'm looking for bushcraft. I'm looking for, survival light. And it would tell the person you're asking exactly what you need. Like, oh, they want something where death isn't such an option, where you can turn off, creative survival. Maybe it's all about building or et cetera, et cetera. And it really enables you to narrow it down rather than having to see people bitch that they bought 37 survival games and like, this is the first one that's good, quote unquote. This is the first one that I like that's good. Because it's nothing against the other ones, and I hate when they get bombed for things, mechanics, or whatever that are unique to them, that are survival, that are whatever, but people come in and they didn't like it because they were expecting a Valheim. They were expecting a TLD interloper. And now you review bomb this game, and now this game has a shit review, and now it's lower in the thing. It's got, fewer stars, or however you want to phrase it. And now people start to avoid it, and something that could have been great or it could have been worked on or whatever is in its death spiral because people came into it with improper expectations.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly what I mean when I say that, it affects devs as well, because if you get a handful of people that were expecting one type of survival game and they get the other, they get the one that you're trying to create, suddenly there's, the expectation versus the reality hits, and then you get people angry that they didn't get the kind of game they want, and then, like you said, they review bomb, they flame you, they demand changes, and it's not good all around. Nobody's happy in that situation.
Well, nobody who has to read their shit is happy, so I ain't happy when I have to read that
Well,
shit.
they're not happy because they're not getting the game they want. The dev's not happy because, their game is getting trashed, their vision is getting stepped on, and we're not happy because we have to read it. So nobody's happy.
Fuckers. So I think that's a good point to end this discussion.
We're not happy.
Ain't, what is it? Oh, fuck. Yes. If mama ain't happy,
Ain't nobody happy.
really, what else is there to say? And if you do play Dying Light and you got that, props to you. I wish this was a video because right now I would just have mama spinning Buckethead.
The spinning
Just,
button. Yep, absolutely.
just to end the podcast. Oh, God. Okay, so if you managed to make it this far, appreciate you guys stopping by. This is the second hashtag survival podcast that will be up for anybody to avail themselves of to listen to. Our first one was on Anchor, and chances are if you're listening to this, it is going to be on a different host because I'm looking to change it for many background mechanical type reasons. I will include a link to the website, and on that website there are links to the Discord, which you should stop by and talk to us, the curator page where there's over 70 survival game suggestions and reviews and things. The website itself obviously has the filterable, searchable game indexes. You'll have access to the link, obviously, for the podcast. You'll have access to the links for, there's an Instagram. We just got a new Twitter to match the name of the podcast, and I'll actually be moving the site, like I mentioned, to a new URL. And we have a newly launched Patreon as well, which will also be linked on the website. And that will go to supporting bringing up all this content, this kind of survival hub experience that we're working on. And I won't go down into the trail on that, but you can read about that on the Patreon link, which will be in the episode notes for this episode. And I'm trying to make sure that I have everything covered. Dee, was there anything I'm missing?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I think I got everything. The podcast will go live each Friday. So if you're hearing this, it's probably a Friday. There is the Survival News Roundup, which will be posted on the website on Saturday. And then if you look at the Patreon, there's actually a behind the scenes podcast that will be getting its legs under it. And the release date for that is yet to be determined. But that will be handled through, I believe, a different player than this one. So just something to keep in mind. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed our rambles, and I hope you were just as confused on what a survival game is as us. And now you can go and look at your Steam library and try to figure it out. And I think that is it. If Dee has nothing else to add, I will end it here.
I do not. Other than, if you do want to get in on the discussion, join our Discord and, give us give us a heads up for what you think makes a survival game, whether you had some of these experiences, whether you sort of struggled with understanding what sort of survival games you like versus what you're playing and what you didn't expect, what you did expect, all that sort of stuff. Come join us on Discord. Let's have a discussion. It's fun times.
Yes, that reminds me. When you go on the Discord, you'll want to react to the role in the opening channel. That'll drop you into the Discord proper, and then you want to go to the roles channel where you can actually sign up to be pinged for certain events, things like new podcast postings, new game news, new reviews, or website posts. And if you sign up for each of these pings, they will actually open a private channel. So if you sign up for podcast, you will get access to the podcast discussion chat, and you can chime in. We still have a discussion going about inventory from last week's podcast and magical wormhole, and you can just chime in with stuff there. And I believe, which I tried to mess with last time, but I did not get to complete, there's actually some little question thing I can post on Spotify, so people can even chime in there, I think, or ask questions. So I will fuck with that. But for right now, I think we're good. So stay safe.
Goodbye.